I'm your host, Dino Watt, and get ready to be inspired as you learn exactly how to own your role. Welcome, everybody, to the Own Your Role podcast. I'm your host, Dino Watt, and again, excited to have you here. Thank you so much for being here and tuning in every week as we release another episode of the show, trying to bring you the most unique entrepreneurs we can think of so that you can grow your business and connect more with your team members. Thank you, everybody who has shared this podcast, all of those that have subscribed and got the little notification bell going on so that you know when a new episode comes out. We've had such amazing guests over the last few months. And with a new iteration of the show, the Own Your Role show, this is episode 21, and it's because of you that have been helping us get more and more great guests. And today is no exception. Her name is Angela Johnson, and she's going to share with you ways that you can actually connect more, communicate more with your team members, and how she's been able to use a very unique process inside of her business and that she shares with her clients as well. I can't wait to dive in because I'm always interested in finding new ways to help us all connect more. Because, you know, as I always say, relationships are the foundation of everything that we do. Everything I've ever received in my life up to this moment is due to a relationship that I built, and everything I will receive from here on out will be from a relationship that I build. And I think Angela's going to help us do that today. So excited to have you all here. Let's get started with the show. Angela, welcome to Own Your Role podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Excited to have you here. Well, we always start every episode because I believe stories are what connects all of us together as human beings. Tell us your story. Tell us how you got here, how you got involved in doing what you're doing, and whatever unique stuff you want to share with us.
Okay. Well, I'm a bit of a broken corporate employee. So that's usually the hook that defines my story,
Nice.
Right?
They broke you.
Yeah, they totally broke me. I started my career in a call center of all places. And they hired me because of my ability to talk to people on the phone. And their premise was that they could teach anybody technology skills. So I learned to code, I learned database administration, but then I found what the rest of the world would pay for those skills and very quickly left. And everyone kept putting me into a teaching or coaching kind of a role just because of my ability to explain those things.
Yeah.
And so as I started working as a project manager, I really felt like an adult daycare provider checking up on people. And I'm like, why can't these people talk? Why can't they talk to each other? Right. To me, this is just such common sense. And so 18 years ago, I found this thing called Agile, more specifically Scrum, as a way of working, which just all the common sense stuff I had been thinking were right there in the framework. And I'm like, this is the way I'm going to do work. And as I started to have people market my services and get client work for me, I'm like, wait a minute, they're taking quite a hefty cut for just being the matchmaker. Why can't I do that also? And so I founded my business. It'll be 14 years this year in 2024. Wow. Yeah. So 14 years ago, broke a corporate employee. I said, I can do this myself. And I got busy. And so I attracted like-minded individuals. And here I am 14 years later with not only a team, a bricks and mortar space in Minneapolis, Minnesota as well.
Oh, interesting. So it's an actual place people can come to, as well as you do training and virtual and all this other fun stuff.
Absolutely. Because one of the things that we were starting to see reflect poorly on our brand was holding a training event in a hotel ballroom. Gross, $5 for a can of Coke, whatever.
Yeah.
And so one of my teammates literally said, how hard could this be? Let's do it for ourselves, right? Famous last words.
Yeah.
So we get into this big lease with 8,000 square feet in 2019. Before a global pandemic.
Nice. Good timing.
Right. And the center was really just starting to cash flow, not only with our own events, but we licensed the space out to other people who want to use the facility.
Yep.
And so when COVID hit and our classes had to flip virtual, much like you and I are talking over Zoom today, we each took kind of one of these little rooms and turned it into a studio.
Good.
But then what really has started to boom is everybody else using our space.
Yep.
Because so many companies let their leases go.
Yep.
And they're like, hey, you're not going to lock us into a membership like a co-working space. I'm like, no, we're pay to play. What do you need?
Yeah.
And so that's really our side hustle has almost become a bit of our main hustle.
Nice.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like the coaching and training is kind of taking a secondary seat to the physical space.
Listen, that's really smart. I have said for years, I'm here in Utah and same problem, right? Hotels or convention centers, and you're paying astronomical prices for things. And I've even had other speaker friends of mine be like, why are we not putting together our own little space where we can all collab together, do a co-op, if you will. So I
Yep.
think it's really smart. I'm glad you pivoted the way that you did, especially after getting something like COVID, because you've heard the stories of so many people who got into that business in 2019 or beginning of 2020, and then it died because they didn't pivot and they weren't able to think about how to use that. So really, really smart. I got to tell you, I've been in the personal development training space for, gosh, going on at least 20, 22 years now. I had never, before I read your bio, heard of Scrum.
Oh,
So
okay.
can you tell us a little bit about what that is and what the framework is and all that?
Absolutely. It is not an acronym for anything. If you're
Okay.
familiar at all with the sport of rugby, when you
Yeah.
see them get into their huddle, and
Yeah,
they're
that's
all
what I
kind of
thought of.
right. That's exactly what it is. It is short for scrummage. That's what that formation is called. And
Uh-huh.
people are working together to get the ball headed in a common direction. So if you think about that metaphor as it relates to a way of doing work, if
Mm,
we are leveraging each other's strengths and focused on the same goal, if we're
mhm.
all pulling in disparate opposite directions, we're not going to
Yeah.
achieve our goals and objectives. So it's just my son tells people it's just teamwork. He goes, Scrum is just teamwork. Okay. It's just people working together. My
Hey, hey,
mom
hey, don't
teaches
dumb it
people
down here. Come on now. What are these kids dumbing down our
out of the mouths of
really.
babes. He's brilliant. I'm like, you tell people what mom does.
So why was that so attractive to you when you first saw it? What was the kind of light bulb moment for you where you went, oh, this is different?
One of the biggest words in the framework is accountability. And
Mm,
that's what drove me nuts in classic project management. I felt like I was running around nagging people for status. And then I'm the mouthpiece, I'm the reporting. Oh, why can't people talk to each other? Why can't they own things for themselves? And if you think about it from a behavior standpoint, we say in our company we want accountability. And then the first thing we do is take it away from somebody
mm,
by having somebody else go follow up with them. The only way
sure.
to get accountable behavior is for somebody to experience that, is
Yeah.
to say, hey, here's what I need. No, I didn't get done. I could use somebody's help. And so that's what attracted me was this is an enormous amount of what I call common sense in terms of the way we can work more effectively with fewer adult daycare providers checking up on people. So
Well,
we
what
can
you
actually get the outcome that we want in a simpler
yeah.
way.
Well, what you said there just a moment ago, I think is part of the key is where you said being able to say, yeah, I didn't get it done. I need some help with this, or it wasn't exactly what the vulnerability of and the approval to be able to say, hey, I didn't get it done or I messed up. That also is accountability. But so many people are afraid of the reaction, the repercussions of that. So it makes it really challenging. It's I saw this thing a couple of months ago where somebody's talking about delegation. They're
Mm-hmm.
like, we talk about delegation so much, but when were we ever taught how to delegate in our lives? Like we didn't go to high school and say, and the teacher say, hey, you have a report due. Make sure you get somebody else to do that for you. Right. We never
Right.
were taught to delegate. We weren't, other than what was it, Huck Finn or Tom Sawyer, who delegated out painting the fence, right? And in the books, we weren't taught that. So being able to have a space where it's okay to say, hey, I messed that up. I didn't finish it. Can you help me? It's a really big challenge, I think, for a lot of businesses.
I do think that fail stands for first attempt in learning. And the
Mm,
more that as leaders, we can let people know this is
mm.
a learning organization. You're not going to get fired for making a mistake. We want you to learn. That's how I learn. I don't know about you, but I learn more from my failures than from anything else.
Yep.
And sometimes it's that ego. That's what you're describing, right? Our ego is not our amigo because somebody's ego, that little internal voice will be like, well, I can't admit that. I'll look stupid. No, 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 no. We're all a team here. We want you to say where you need help or what's going on so that somebody else can maybe help you or you could learn or heck, you could teach someone else who needs help. So that's the whole point. It's not statusy or you know, I want to say punitive. It's not really punitive. We're not trying to punish people by doing this.
Right.
We're trying to say, we want you to share these things so that we can all learn.
Right. I love that you said this is a learning organization. If more people had that attitude that, hey guys, this is a learning organization. It's okay. I have a process I call, culture of failure. That it's
Mhm.
okay to have a culture of failure as long as we're in the focus of learning from the failure. But I've never thought about the learning organization. That is great. So Scrum, the way you described it seems pretty simple, basic, but I'm assuming there's a lot of details around it.
It's actually only 5 events
Oh,
and 3 accountabilities. You would call them roles. The reason we call them accountabilities is the framework doesn't really care what you call them. For example,
hmm,
there's one person that we call product owner. You might call them CEO, you might call them product manager, you
hmm.
might call them delivery vice president, just whoever is giving the intent. Here's what we need, here's why we need it, here's who it's for.
Got it.
Then we have the doers, the people doing the work. And because this is based on product development, they do call them developers, but I don't have my clients get hung up on that. I'm like, just call them the people doing the work, right? If you don't like the word developer, product developer, people doing the work. And then we have this person we call Scrum Master, which is all about people and process, care and feeding. Are things going well? Can they escalate for removal of impediments or blockers that are impeding the doers from getting things done?
You
Because
said
if it's a
care and feeding, not care and feeding.
yeah, care and feeding.
I was like, care and feeding. Oh, she takes
Oh
care
my
of all the
gosh.
terrible people.
Right. Be like my son latching onto that word. Ugh, okay.
So they're the ones who are in charge of all those process, making sure everything works, everything's flowing the way it should.
Right.
Okay.
And sometimes in a small organization, and by small, I mean, if you're an entrepreneur that has 10 people or less, my organization is 10 people. I also have clients who have, 50 people. There are, of course, gargantuan organizations with
Right.
tens of thousands of employees who have latched on to Scrum and Agile, but you have to kind of look at it in the context of a product,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a project, maybe in one department of that large organization. But in smaller entrepreneurial shops like mine, it really is a whole lot of common sense and a way to get things done. Because as the entrepreneur that founded this company, the last thing I want to be is a bottleneck. I don't want everybody going, well, go ask Angela, go ask Angela. No, don't
Right.
ask Angela. She's busy, right?
Right.
Like you
Right.
figure it out,
That's why you were hired.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so when somebody implements the Scrum mentality or process, and is it a process? Is it a
We call it a framework.
framework? Okay,
We call it a framework because it's more like guidelines.
okay,
It's like, no, we're not going to answer every single question. If you look at something like project management,
mhm,
that body of knowledge is like thousands of pages. They tell you how to think. You don't even have to just look it up.
right,
Scrum's more like guidelines because it's like, we're going to give you 3 accountabilities saying who's responsible for what. We're going to give you a few events, you might call them meetings, and say within those guidelines, figure it out.
mm.
So if we need to know who this is for, what it is, and why we need it, let's go to the product owner. Product owner, can you clarify that for us? Sure. But how are we going to actually do the work? That's up to this self-managed group of people.
So
They get to figure that out.
so I love that idea because how right now there's such a focus, if you will, around the TikTok mentality of, hey, I'm just here to do my job, collect a paycheck, and go home. Don't ask me to do more than I should. I don't need to like people around me. I don't like if you got to tell me exactly what to do. I'll do exactly that, and that's it. How does Scrum help people take ownership of those accountabilities, those responsibilities that would kind of expand their horizons, if you will?
Yeah, that self-managed piece is huge. And I don't know if you're familiar with Daniel Pink's work. For some reason, he popped into my head when we talk about what really motivates people. He always says autonomy, mastery, purpose.
Hmm.
Well, in Scrum, autonomy, that yes, if that's what motivates people, you mean I get to figure out how
Mhm.
to do this? I get to use my talents and my abilities and my brain? Awesome, because I've got ideas. And it's not at the expense of quality because we do talk about who this is for and what they expect, but we don't micromanage how people get that done.
Mhm.
Purpose. We have this person called product owner saying, hey, here's the goal. Here's the intent. Okay, Great. We've got a purpose. We've got a goal. And in Scrum, we look at those goals in 30-day or less segments. Now, the fancy word we use is sprint, but you could just say weeks, 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, or 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can have changing goals and objectives, but we're going to time box those events so that we have a bit of a baseline. We can figure out, are we doing well? Are we not doing well? And then mastery, people like to get better at things. I mean, look at why people play instruments or why people are on TikTok making videos. You know, they like to use their creativity and to get better. So one of the Scrum events is all about, hey, how'd this week go? How'd this sprint go? What does anybody have ideas? Like, what could we do better? Or what could we stop doing, that wasn't really helpful? Because now you have an immediate chance to course correct that, as opposed to at the end of a long year when, well, why didn't you say something sooner?
Right, exactly. Well, I love that you're connecting the autonomy part with accountability, because I think in general, I have a process I take people through about the 5 support styles and how people feel supported. And one of them is autonomy. And when I say what the support styles are first, people are, oh, it's autonomy. I just want to be left alone. Tell me to do the job. Leave me alone. And I always back it up with, and in order for you to be there, you have to have a high ability of accountability. You have to really be good with that. So I think it's so good that it goes hand in hand together. So you wrote a book called the Scrum Master Files.
The Scrum Master Files. Yep.
And so you took the concept of Scrum and did what with it?
So that is kind of a confessional for me from when I was a new Scrum Master. Because one of the things I see people struggle with is if they want to move into a Scrum career, become a Scrum Master, and they've never done it, they're like, what kind of situations am I going to be in? What's it look like? What's it feel like? So it's like, well, here's some of my greatest failures.
Here's my journal.
Right. And so what I did is I created them in the form of case studies, but I completely anonymized them. There is not, and don't worry, clients, there's no non-disclosures being violated, but there also is no personal pronouns. So it puts the person, the reader, in the scenario. And then it's okay, what would you do in this situation, Scrum Master? And clients of mine swear to God, I'm talking about their company. So there's something universally appealing about stories, like you were saying at the beginning. Like just put them right into the scenario. And then the fun part of it, after they work through what they would do in that scenario, is I tell them what actually happened. So I'm like, here's what actually happened, and here's how it could have been even better, because there's no one way to answer these things. And so it's 6 of my best, worst, however you want to think of that, situations that I found myself in when I was a new Scrum Master.
When you talk about people becoming Scrum Masters, is this kind of like a certification they go through first to learn it? Is it claiming it? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, the certification is a bit like getting your driver's license. Okay. So often people think certification is the end all be all. Yeah. And in this case, it's not. It's come to a 2-day workshop, take an online quiz after the workshop. Here's your driver's license. You are permitted on the street. Nice. We hope you actually get better by doing it. Right. And so people who are critical of that program, the Certified Scrum Master, always demonstrate that they don't get it because they think it should be like a 4-year college degree. No, right. It's your driver's license.
Yeah.
So if you've been working as a Scrum Master for a year or more and you have that CSM, Certified Scrum Master, you can come to an advanced workshop, and then we dive deeper into coaching skills, teaching skills, mentorship skills. And after they've been a Scrum Master for 2 years, the highest level is Certified Scrum Professional. So I'm certified to deliver all 3 of those. So there's only about 250 people in the world who have the credential that I hold to be able to deliver those workshops.
So would this be something that you would recommend for just a business owner in general to understand the framework and to be able to implement it in their office and make it easier for them?
They could certainly do that. And I have had people do that because they want to know what their people would potentially be in for. Yeah. So people take that CSM for all kinds of reasons. And it's really anybody who's interested in using the framework or becoming the Scrum Master. Because sometimes we get people who say, I am not going to be the Scrum Master, but I need to know what I'm looking for and what's going to happen if I chose to go down this path.
Sure. What are some of the characteristics that you've seen make the best Scrum Masters and some that don't?
Oh, yeah. The fun ones are people skills, people skills, people skills. So I'm always like, hey, if you shy away from confrontation, if you don't like working with people, this is not the job for you.
Mm.
And it's okay. It's totally okay to admit that. But you've got to be listening with your ears and listening with your eyes and really pick up on all those subtle cues because you're going to help people during times of conflict. So if you're hiding under the desk, no, this is when people need you to put your black and white stripes on and grab your whistle and help them through it. And so those are the greatest characteristics we look for is those natural people skills. So on the flip side of that, people who like telling other people what to do, which isn't a bad thing. The world needs, leaders like that too, who have that commander's intent. Scrum Master is not for that person. Maybe we'd show them product owner. Maybe we'd say, hey, if you're really good at boiling things down into goals and objectives and articulating those, let's show you product owner if you really like being in charge. If you really like being responsible for dates, dollars, those kinds of things, we'll show you product ownership, but Scrum Master is not for you. And then definitely someone who just has a short fuse and doesn't like working with people or has no patience.
Well, in
Probably
general,
not the good one.
Yeah, right. Because I can see how in general your personality already, just even on the show, you're very outgoing. You're very somebody who is likable, who likes to have fun. So is that kind of like the why it was so attractive to you because it allowed you to maybe amplify the personality you already had?
I think so. The one thing that I'm very cautious with my students about is you don't need to be like me. I have some amazing Scrum Masters that I work with who are introverts. And actually, one of my graduates was on my podcast and we titled it, Can Introverts Make Good Scrum Masters? And of course they can. But sometimes people think, well, I don't want to be like her. She's kind of crazy, right? She's kind of out there and fearless and just kind of says it. Hey, we all have a different style. Behavioral styles vary. And so introvert kind of people or quieter people can make very effective Scrum Masters as well.
Now
they will just deliver their message in a softer way.
Yeah, I bet I could see where it could be a good holistic way of looking at business, depending, no matter what your personality is on there. Who are your ideal clientele that typically you coach and that you love to work with?
Yeah, my ideal customer is a company that has 5,000 employees or less, preferably a lot less. Like my favorite clients on the planet are about 250, 300 employees, privately held, which is a big one because in publicly traded companies, the figureheads, the leaders, the CEO, the CIO, oftentimes aren't even empowered. Sure. They have to answer to a board. Somebody else is pulling their strings.
Yep.
So in a privately held company, we have leaders who can actually make change. And that's what Scrum's about. It's about behavior change and structure change. So right out of the gate, if you don't have somebody from a leadership perspective who can make that happen, it tends to not go over very well. Because then you wind up just kind of putting lipstick on the pig. You're using a lot of the vocabulary, but you're not actually changing. Right. So I really like smaller privately held organizations where I can make real change.
And where have you seen Scrum kind of work the best, or are there any like really cool? Well, you have stories, obviously. You have a book about it. So the cool stories that you've seen that have helped people transform in their business.
We've had a franchise organization. And if you think about that, independently owned franchises are small businesses, depending on the way the franchise is structured. I'm not talking Starbucks. Everybody knows they're corporate owned, right? But, somebody like a Subway or somebody like, a Dunkin' Donuts, individual franchises, right? So those have worked really, really well. We love working with those folks. I also like working with non-software organizations. For example, one of my favorite clients that turned their business completely around had 50 employees, and they make the foam that goes in these headsets, that I'm wearing, like these, or the earbuds. And they were in danger of closing, and they started focusing in 2-week sprints, and they started delivering after 18 weeks, 9 2-week sprints. And they started increasing the return on their investment. And prior to that, they were not sure they were going to be around another year
Wow, that's
when they
cool.
were trying to do it the old way, so to speak.
That's got to be really nice to see.
It's
So,
fun.
so if you were to kind of summarize what Scrum does for, whether it be conflict resolution, whether it be team unity, like what would you say it does the most? Where do you get the biggest bang for your buck?
Definitely amplifies teamwork. My own team says none of us is as smart as all of us.
Mm,
So it's, we're better together. Yes, we've got some great talent on the team, but when you put everybody together, there's always a better result that comes that we may not even have seen going
sure.
into it.
And how does Scrum help everybody kind of break that down? And, conflict happens, stuff
It
happens.
does.
Where people are people are people, and we're all weird. So, how does Scrum give you the ability to help people kind of calm that down, look at it from a different perspective, and get the result that we're all looking for?
Yeah, no framework is going to solve that problem for you, but the opportunity this framework gives you
Right.
is something called a retrospective. So at
Okay.
the end of every week or 2 weeks or however long our sprints are, it's a psychologically safe conversation because it's only those people that are on the Scrum team that get to talk to each other candidly about how things are going. And you mentioned some of the teamwork you do. Maybe you can identify with this. That base layer of trust has to be there because if you don't have a base layer of trust, you
Mm,
really don't have a team. You kind of have a collection of people,
yeah.
and there is going to be conflict. Our team has conflict. I mean, it's largely been together for the majority of that 14 years. We're very clear with our students that we don't always get along. That's not realistic. Nobody's talking about singing kumbaya. We bounce back from conflict faster because of that trust.
I love that because I think so often, from my experience, I see so many leaders who even have a problem addressing the conflict until it's unavoidable, right? I have a great friend, Amy Walker. I use this quote all the time where she says, no unaddressed frustration gets better.
Right.
So, but we often, I think, as human beings, but also as leaders, you've got personality types. And I would even say maybe it afflicts more to people who are in smaller offices because you do have such immediate connection to all the personalities, right? If you have an
Mm-hmm.
office, like you said earlier, of 10 people, 20 people, you're working with every single one of those people every single day. Whereas a 200-person office, you might not see that person for a couple of weeks.
Right. We are very into each other's stuff around here, whether we
Yeah.
whether we want to be or not. And there are times when we just get on each other's nerves and we do bounce back faster. And I think we're able to be candid with each other. There are stories one of my teammates and I tell where he stood up in a crowded restaurant and just yelled, "I quit," and walked out of the
What?
restaurant. Yeah. And a
Wow.
couple teammates were like, "Are you going to follow him?" I'm like, "No." I'm like, "Do you know what's going on in his life right now?" And they're like, "No." I knew that a sibling of his had been diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma. I
Mm,
knew that his dad had been asked to get to the hospital, do not pass go, do not collect $200. I
mm.
knew he was building a new house. I knew it was his wedding anniversary and they were trying to decide whether to delay the trip to Hawaii or to see what was going to happen with the sibling and the father. I said,
Wow.
"So what's he going to do? Take it out on his wife? Is he going to take it out on his kids?" He took it out on the one person he knew who could handle it. So no, I'm not going to follow him. And lo and behold, his dad did pass. His sister hung in there for a little while longer, but 3 weeks after the funeral, we were on a phone call, and he said, "So do I still have my job?" And I said, "Of course you do, because
Mm,
you took it out on the one person that you knew was still going to be here." And he's like,
mm.
"Oh, thank God."
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
But we had that trust. We had amazing trust with each other, which is just like a bank account. You can't just say, "Trust me." Oh, no, no, no. You have to make deposits. You have to make these little deposits along the way so that when the big withdrawal like that one happened, there was something to draw from. And we had made all those
Yeah.
deposits, whether they were silly team building things or whether they were team lunches or whether they were just chit chatting.
Yeah.
I
Good
mean,
conversation. Sure.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you started out in this and you started to recognize that this was somewhere you wanted to something you want to implement into your life and then into your businesses. Um, you mentioned something about the agile
Mhm.
as well as Scrum.
Yes.
Are those the same thing? Are they different concepts? How do they work together?
They're related concepts, but the world tries to make them the same. So I appreciate you asking, because Scrum can be considered an agile framework, but agile isn't the same thing as Scrum. The two people who created Scrum in 1993 were at a snowbird ski resort, so not very far away from you, I'm
I mean,
sure.
yep,
You're like, I've heard of snowbird. I'm in
yep,
Utah.
yep.
So they showed up, but these people who created something called extreme programming also showed up, and some gentlemen who had created other ways of working, primarily in the software world. And they all got together and they said, huh, we have some things in common. There are some values that are similar across all of these frameworks. And they called those values agile. Now, the world just loves that damn word, right?
Mm,
Agile, pivot, nimble. Can you turn
sure.
on a dime for a dime? But so Scrum is one of those agile frameworks, but agile doesn't always mean Scrum. It could mean extreme programming. It could mean, dynamic system development method, but Scrum tends to be the popular one. And I think it's because there's a framework. I believe because there is certification and people like badges for things, it took off more so than some of the other agile frameworks.
Got it. And in the Scrum framework, I know in the book you have commitment, courage, focus, openness, respect. Those are basically the 5 pillars that everyone's working underneath. I often talk about creating a new language in your businesses, that you're talking to the language as opposed to the person. I think oftentimes we can say, hey, that wasn't very honest. Well, that's a judgment call to somebody, right? We're
Right.
just saying, hey, how could we have been, or how could you have been more transparent with that person? All of a sudden it talks to the value, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Would you consider those the values of Scrum, the commitment, courage, focus, openness, and respect?
Yes, they are. Yep. And when we quiz certified scrum masters, there is a quiz question on those. They have to understand those 5 values:
Mm,
commitment, courage, focus, openness, and respect. They are crucial. And they aren't just pretty words on a slide. They aren't just fluff. We mean that stuff. So openness is that transparency, the courage to say, I don't know, I could use some help, right? The courage to even say, no, that is not the most important thing for us to focus on right now. This other thing is.
mm.
So, yeah,
Well,
those are a big deal.
it's interesting you use the word courage, because that was going to be where my next question came
Oh,
about you. Um, where have you found that courage has been the most helpful, or if it has been most helpful in you and your business over the last 14 years?
even starting, even having the courage to start my own thing. I am in a very male dominated industry, because Scrum is popular in information technology. It
Mhm.
can be used outside of information technology, and a lot of my favorite clients are. But at the beginning of this conversation, I told you I used to write code. I used to be a database administrator. So it definitely was in a very male dominated industry
Sure.
in IT. And then okay, now I'm going to become an entrepreneur and a CEO and just do my own thing. Uh, that took a heck a lot of courage, because so many small businesses fail, and we're going
Yeah.
on our 14th year.
Yeah.
And then even crazier for me to sign a 5-year lease on a brick and mortar space. And then a global pandemic shuts it down,
Yeah.
So I always say, I'm pretty fearless. And I don't know where that comes from necessarily, other than my mantra kind of is, how hard could it be? Like, let's try something. What's the worst thing that could happen? We fail. Oh, okay. I've done that a lot in my
Yeah.
career, and I'm
Great,
still here.
great mantras, right? It's so true. How hard can it be? It's probably not going to kill you. Most of the things aren't going to kill you.
No, they
Most
aren't.
of them. Most of them. That's amazing. When you look at, and you're interviewing people, especially now, I think there's been a bit of a shift since COVID, right, around how people approach their businesses. Where do you feel the most challenges lie with business owners right now, where Scrum can be helpful for them?
I hear a lot of my peers not trusting people. And I'm like,
Yes.
seriously? When they talk about, well, I don't know what they're doing, and they need their camera on, or I need to see them X number of well, wait a minute. if you don't trust them, why do they work for you?
Mm,
Who who hired this person?
mm,
So I think a lot is being revealed right now about the culture
mm.
of those organizations. And it was probably like that before the pandemic.
Sure.
Some of these behaviors of this work from home and whatnot has just shown a big light.
Magnified it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so we're very clear with people that you have to want to come into an office just because of our brick and mortar space, but it's not a 40-hour a week thing. It's very dependent on, are there guests in the space? Do we have coverage? Because if somebody is teaching online, well, you could do that from home, but guess what? We've got the awesome Wi-Fi here, and it's not going to go down when all your neighbors are vying for it.
Yeah.
When the lawnmower inevitably starts up outside the window, we don't have that problem here
Yeah.
because we have these awesome little studios. So we've made it really attractive to want to come in. And I don't know that I could work from home as much as some people do. I would find all kinds of reasons, shiny objects to get distracted by. So
I
I
know
like,
what you're talking about.
I know.
That's crazy. I don't have a clue what you mean.
So I need the discipline of coming into an office. So we're very clear about that. And it has nothing to do with how we feel about trust, because we trust people. I mean,
Mhm.
this team is so trusted. They have a stamp with my signature on it. They have access to the checkbook. They have company credit cards. There's a beer fridge. There's a wine fridge. And in 14 years, ask me how many times those things were abused.
How many times were they abused?
0.
That's amazing.
Not once. Somebody I was saying that to said, well, you must hire adults. Well, yeah. Back to, if you don't trust people,
Yep.
why do they work for you?
Well, I was going to say similar thing of like, well, that's a hiring process. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That means that I use the phrase often, hire 3 times slower to fire twice as fast. And the idea around that is almost all of the challenges that we see in business that I see with my clients, it can be completely tracked back to the hiring process.
Yeah.
What questions did you or did you not ask? Do they actually trust you? Do you trust them? Are you doing this because of desperation, which happens all the time, hiring because we just need a warm body, versus you're hiring the right person at the right time for the right reasons? And that's obviously a huge, huge reason why you have that success that you do, because you've hired correctly.
Well, we made all the mistakes you just said in the first few years.
Mm-hmm.
I made them all. And one I didn't hear in your list was I hired a competitor, right? I thought, oh, I'm so smart, right? Other people are playing checkers and only I will win this chess game called business. Ha ha ha. Right. So there was this person I didn't want to compete against. And so I hired them and it was just awful. It was the most toxic hire of my career in terms of what it did to the culture. And so, like you said, fire twice as fast. Yes, we voted that person off the island very quickly. But then it's like, okay, how can we learn from that? How can we not be in that position again? But then I did it again.
Well, but going again from this is a learning organization. When we do that, we recognize, if we're willing to, I don't think a lot of people do it as often as they should, but, I hired them for my own selfishness.
Right.
Right. I did it for my reasonings, and then they're not stepping up to my selfishness. What's their problem?
Right. Yeah. Didn't they just mystically know this plan that I was not transparent about?
Right. Totally. Wow. Where can people reach you and find out more about your services?
You and I were talking about my generic name, Angela Johnson, at the beginning of this podcast. And so if you go to LinkedIn, you're going to find 32,000 Angela Johnsons. But if you put in Angela Johnson Scrum, I am the only one that comes up.
Okay.
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Angela Johnson Scrum, and message me, or you can go to scrumfiles.com. We have a free gift for folks at scrumfiles.com if they want some easy ways to get started. But I'm happy to do a discovery call as well if you just hit me up on LinkedIn.
And your book can be found on Amazon as well, right?
It can. And the Audible was narrated by me. So It is me speaking on Audible. If you go to scrumfiles.com, though, you can get an autographed copy, which Amazon can't do for you. So
love that. Love that idea. That's wonderful. Well, Angela, we typically end our show with 4 questions that we ask everybody. They're kind of off top of your head, random questions based around the role idea. Are you willing to play?
I'll play. Let's go.
All right. So the first question is, what do you feel is your highest and greatest responsibility on earth?
Mom. I'm a mother.
Love it. And yeah, tell us about your kids. How many kids do you have?
Well, I have one because I'm a geriatric parent. So I was told I couldn't. And I delivered at 42. He's 11. So you can do the math.
Awesome. Love it. That's great. Well, congratulations. Number two, what do you want as the ultimate outcome for your life?
I want to retire. I want to retire so bad and I can't. You heard the geriatric parent part, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where do you want to retire?
I would be happy retiring in Minnesota where I live, but I would also be just as happy, someplace tropical. I think it'll depend on where he wants to go. Dad and I are pretty invested in his success, so it'll be wherever he wants to go.
Yeah, I mean Minnesota, you can do the snowbird idea, right? In 6 months or 8 months or whatever here and there. Yeah.
We always say it's just cooler here.
It's 100% cooler there. Yes.
Yes.
I live in Utah and I don't want to live in that much coolness. I'm originally in California, so Utah is bad enough for me. Question number 3 is, what do you actually consider, and I know you have to deal with this so much, what do you consider true leadership to be?
I really am bought into servant leadership. It is not about me. And so when I say I just work here and people laugh because they're like, it's your, I'm like, no, I'm totally serious. Like most days I'm either teaching or with a client or doing my thing. I have the dream team. So it's got to be about them and not about me. So it's really that servant leadership. How can I help? But I'm going to get out of your way. I'm going to hire these great people and let them do great things.
Them knowing that is incredibly empowering too. Like that's great.
Absolutely.
Last question is, unfortunately, every single one of us will have our final day in this life. What experience do you want to have or hope to have between now and dead?
That's kind of crazy. Between now and dead. I'd like to have a grandchild. I hope that I live long enough to spoil that grandchild rotten and give him back.
That comes up a lot. That comes up.
Oh, does it?
Well, a lot of people. I
now you know where everybody's head's at.
No, yeah, I want to see my grandkids' wedding. I want to, I want to dance with my granddaughter. I love it. I love it. That's so great. And for me, why I love it is because, like I mentioned, I so much focus a lot on the relationship side of our world, of our life, and that's what it all comes down to. At the end of our life, when we are hopefully looking up at a pair of eyes or a couple of pair of eyes as we close ours, that's what will be connection. It won't be about the deal we made, whatever. It's about that connection. And so I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insight with us around the Scrum idea. And again, I was brand new to it, so it's really helped me out a lot so much too. And I know people listening were able to be introduced to something possibly new to them that can help them in their business. And I highly encourage everybody to get an autographed copy of the book and make sure that you reach out to Angela and see how you can connect with her and see if going to a Scrum training or getting a Scrum coach is the right thing for you. So thank you, Angela. I really appreciate you coming.
Oh, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Well, everybody, again, thank you for being a part of the Own Your Role podcast. And as we finish up this episode, please remember to subscribe and to get that notification button going on, as well as share it with your friends and colleagues that you think also could benefit from listening to any of the shows, but especially this one today with Angela, who shared her time and energy. And I love her spirit. Her energy has been awesome. And sometimes I got to say, we get guests who have to pull some of that out of them. And Angela, you have it in spades. So thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Everybody have a great day. And we will see you on the next episode of the Own Your Role podcast.